Story 1. It's similar to golf. After a while, you realize that almost everyone is not very skilled at it, but if you don't take it too seriously, it's quite enjoyable. Story 2. I realized that I was setting a double standard, a harsh one for myself and a lenient one for others. This always made me view myself as beneath others, which led to low self-esteem. When I decided to extend the same compassion and fairness to myself that I offer to others, things began to improve for me. Story 3. I made good friends who recognized positive traits in me and communicated that to me over time. I began to see myself differently. Story 4. It wasn't helping. It felt like hating myself was the only fair judgment, and I had to be honest in order to improve. It turns out I could only improve if I stopped holding such a low opinion of myself in the first place. It seemed backward at the time, but years later, I look back at hating myself as an inefficient and chemically driven thought process. Story 5. I moved away from my old place and cut off contact with everyone who could still remember the person I used to be. Previously, it often felt pointless to work on myself because people would still see and judge me based on my past. Their perception of me would never change, regardless of my efforts, and I always felt pressured to meet their expectations. Now, I have the opportunity to control the narrative of my life and my identity with all the new people I meet. Story 6. I'm not suggesting that I recommend this to others, but I had a positive experience with psychedelic mushrooms regarding my self-esteem and negative self-talk. I set an intention to inwardly explore this topic, which I believe was helpful. During my experience, my sense of self really broke down. It was as if a council of my inner selves was meeting to discuss the current state of things. I was fascinated to discover that there was only one part of me that hated myself. He was just the loudest part. I was also able to hear this part explain his issues, and the other parts were better able to challenge my unhelpful thinking. In other words, I felt that I could talk to myself and utilize tools from therapy without my normal negative thought patterns getting in the way, allowing me to conceptualize myself differently, which was beneficial. Story 7. I wrote down a list of everything I disliked about myself right next to a list of everything I liked about myself. The contrast was significant. Then I took action. Asterisk for anything physical, I scheduled appointments, haircut, dermatologist, gym, and so on. Asterisk for anything related to mindset, I changed my vocabulary. Chores became home art project. Run errands became go on adventure. I should / have to do became I get to do. I intentionally started looking for positive things in every location. Nice curtains, good food smells, enjoyable music, whatever I could find that was uplifting. If I ever had a judgmental thought, I would tell myself to stop and consciously replace it with something kind. Asterisk for anything social, I started looking ahead. I got a calendar and texted friends to set up hangouts. I researched concerts or events and added them to my calendar. My husband and I set a travel goal for a 10-year span and began planning how to make that happen financially and with work. I entered friends and family members' birthdays or anniversaries into my calendar, so there was always something to reach out to them about. I started alternating which days I would call people during my commute to keep in touch. It took a few years of consistency, but now I can say that I'm proud of who I am. I'm generally happy every day. Anytime someone lightheartedly says, "See ya, wouldn't want to be ya," I reply, "Well, I like me, so okay," in a sing-song voice, and I genuinely mean it. To quote Snoop Dogg, "I want to thank me for believing in me." Story 8. Always a work in progress. Losing weight has significantly reduced self-hatred. Regaining control of my eating habits overall has had a positive effect. I also give myself more grace. Mistakes happen, and I am only human. Story 9. I realized I was a better friend and person when I treated myself as I treated others. It made me understand that by liking or loving myself, I could like and love others even more, which allowed me to be a better friend and partner. This created a positive feedback loop that increased my self-esteem. Story 10. I still struggle with self-hatred, but it's much less than before. I improved my self-image by changing my appearance. I addressed my self-hatred concerning my sexuality by surrounding myself with sex-positive individuals who share similar preferences. I am still working on overcoming my self-hatred related to my personality and behavior. One aspect I am focusing on is improving my personality and behavior, while another aspect is learning to avoid impossible standards and practicing kindness towards myself. Story 11. I quit all my bad habits and started living a healthier lifestyle, both mentally and physically. I focused on improving myself step by step. It wasn't instant, but the more I committed to becoming better, the less I disliked the person I used to be. Story 12. Acceptance means recognizing and appreciating my flaws. I know I am only human and have good intentions. This does not mean I am always completely happy with myself, as I can get frustrated with some aspects of my personality. However, acceptance has helped me tremendously. Story 13. I learned to love myself as I love others. If I would do it for a friend, I should be able to do it for myself. I am religious, and one of the key verses in the Bible is, "Love your neighbor as yourself." Most people interpret it as treat others as you would like to be treated, which is not wrong, but it does not fully encompass what loving someone means. It's not just about treating them well. It involves thinking of and wishing well for them. The key part is the as yourself. You should love yourself in order to love others better. Story 14. Journaling and exploring on my own helped me fall in love with myself, to be honest. During that time, I could truly sit with myself and understand who I really was outside of other people. Story 15. Exploring spirituality and the self as an illusion, alongside the influence of a good therapist. It is astonishing to me that I don't hate myself anymore. It's quite a journey. Story 16. I didn't, but I also came to know how foolish I am, so I couldn't take my opinions seriously. Somehow, self-criticism was diminished by a lack of self-respect. I don't know how, but it worked. Story 17. I stopped doing the things that made me hate myself and began trying to be the person I wanted to be, the person my dog thinks I am. Story 18. I'm all I've got really, even in my marriage or relationships. It's just me in the end. So why would I hate the person who is looking out for me the most? It's been a long time coming, and it's a constant healing process, but it's my most important relationship. Story 19. I realized my self-worth. After a difficult time, 16 years of maternal influence, and several scars, I understood that this is not how I wanted to feel, and that it was not how my dad and I intended for me to be. I couldn't do better for myself or my sibling, whom I raised until the day I left, if I was dead. I certainly couldn't leave him alone under the care of our mother. Story 20. This is a challenging experience. I reflected on past trauma and insecurities. It wasn't about getting better. It was more about managing those thoughts. As I grew older, I acquired new traumas and insecurities. I believe I need a new management approach. Story 21. Just growing older, living life. It may sound trivial, but by doing what I can and moving forward, I finally feel proud of my accomplishments and gradually hate myself less. Story 22. It's exhausting to hate who you are. Eventually, you become so weak and tired from it that you kind of give up in a positive way. Then acceptance, healing, and change can begin to happen. Story 23. Advice from my therapist is that you wouldn't feel upset with yourself if you didn't believe you could improve. This means that self-hatred indicates your potential for growth. Use this awareness as motivation rather than allowing it to lead to depression. A significant aspect of self-hatred, for me, was comparing myself to others. Learning to develop a growth mindset, where the only person you compete against is yourself, provides a way out of that dark place. Story 24. I realized that I disliked how I thought others perceived me rather than how I genuinely perceived myself. I have always considered some of my personality traits, beliefs, and interests objectively undesirable and unappealing, but I never felt the urge or need to change them, despite craving validation and wanting to fit in. I am the way I am for a reason, and pretending to be someone else is very exhausting. I eventually realized that I am not necessarily disappointed in myself, and I am actually quite proud of my beliefs, actions, and habits. Just because others cannot see value in you does not mean you are worthless. Story 25. I have always maintained high standards for myself. However, there were many instances when laziness, selfishness, foolishness, or a lack of integrity led me to fall short of those standards. I became very hard on myself. My boss used to say that no one can be as hard on me as I am. One day, I reached a breaking point. It took a lot of effort, but I still uphold those high standards while being less critical of myself. I am proud of the person I see in the mirror. Story 26. I realized that I am the only person I can count on, so I made changes to ensure I can truly rely on myself. In the process, I fixed or accepted most of the things I disliked about myself. My mantra: good things happen by chance. Bad things happen by chance. Good things happen when I make them happen. I also let go of the idea that I should be happy or comfortable all the time. Additionally, I let go of the belief that I am a good person, not because I wanted to do bad things, but because it created a sense of entitlement that the real world would never fulfill. Story 27. I began to trust people and accept me for who I am. I stopped masking and putting up the wall of shame. I am still working on this now. Story 28. I reached out to a therapist who taught me to challenge my thoughts and also connected with a friend who helped me through my depression. They were there for me. I grew in self-love and rewired my brain. Your thoughts are under your control, and they affect your entire system. Take responsibility for them, and you will discover liberation. Story 29. I realized that I had an undiagnosed illness that affected my cognitive function, mood, and memory. I was very hard on myself for feeling slow, not understanding people's jokes, and being anxious about what my peers would ask of me. I am much better now and can think clearly for the most part. Still not perfect, but it's easier to show myself some empathy and accept that it's out of my control. Story 30. Opposite to what some people are saying. I never used to hold myself to high standards. I lacked discipline but labeled it as a lack of motivation. I was lazy but claimed I was tired. After one divorce and a lot of self-reflection, I am now 10 times the person I used to be. Story 31. I hit rock bottom and realized I was losing everything important to me. I could either drown myself in addiction or fight. I decided to fight. I went to the gym 5 days a week, worked on my diet, and lost 100 pounds. I unpacked my trauma and identified patterns in my life that I was making worse. I recognized my triggers and my toxic behavior. I practiced mindfulness and conducted extensive research. It has been 2 years now into my journey, and I would say I am self-aware. I am proud of who I am and that I have reached this point through my own strength. I love myself, and because of that, I can love those around me more fully. Story 32. I worked on becoming someone I wanted to be around because I am always with myself. It also helps to think of yourself as a friend. Have some grace with yourself just as you would with your friends. Story 33. I had kids, and after being my son and daughter's superhero for years, I started to realize I'm not such a bad old bag of bones. That wasn't the end, though. I had a lot of forgiveness to extend to many people, including my younger self. That younger version of me could be difficult, but I occasionally engage in unkind behavior, though I'm supervised by my adult self. Story 34. Therapy was a tremendous help, and the lessons I learned from it before I stopped having sessions are what I carry forward and remember daily now. The things I disliked about myself, my mistakes, and bad habits that contributed to my self-hatred were never going to improve if I just sat there and scolded myself for each one. Learning to forgive myself for my mistakes and to be content with my conscience was like exiting a long and dark tunnel. It's hard to articulate, but the hatred essentially creates a cycle. Compassion, on the other hand, allows for better self-understanding. I found that with self-loathing, I wasn't introspecting or asking why, but merely condemning myself for the things I disliked. However, when I forgave myself for my mistakes, I began to question why I made them and why I was doing things I didn't approve of. I still have undesirable habits, but I find that overall I genuinely love myself as a person now. Story 35. I kept trying to achieve things I was not capable of. I had to admit this to myself, and that really helped. Once I started setting achievable goals, the transition became smoother. The false hope of telling kids that they can do anything isn't fair to them. As parents, we need to understand that not every child will solve the challenge of developing lightspeed travel. Reality can be difficult. Instead of telling them they can't do something, we should teach them that failure is a part of life and to learn from it. We should not let it define them. Story 36. I began reading extensively on sociology, psychology, and history and came to realize that many people are more problematic than I am. Now I feel good about my awareness of the challenges I inherited from individuals who were ignorant and self-absorbed, believing they were superior. I am now dedicating my entire career and life to addressing the issues created by those who came before me. Story 37. I accept that I have flaws and am a constant work in progress. My acceptance of death has helped me realize that I shouldn't be so hard on myself, and especially not on others. Story 38. Realizing that everyone has flaws, some people simply exhibit less negativity than others. I strive to be a good person, but it seems that many individuals go out of their way to be unkind to one another these days. Story 39. On this side of the nut house, I learned a lot about the people in my life who deeply cared for me. I finally realized that if they love me, I should love myself too. After all, we cannot fully love those we hold dear if we do not first love ourselves. The medication also helped. Story 40. A little bit of therapy helped, but ultimately, it was my decision to act in public as if I was well-liked and respected. I didn't believe it, of course, but there is truth to faking it until you make it. After a while, it stops being an act and you settle into a much more balanced perspective of yourself. You might even develop some ego. I also gave myself undeniable examples of why I don't deserve to be hated by making people laugh and by being kind and sensitive. There's more to it than that, and what works for me may not work for you, but it's worth a try. Story 41. Ketamine therapy, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing for trauma recovery, years of counseling, unlearning negative experiences from childhood, and leaving the evangelical church. Wishing you the best. Hating yourself is no fun. There is hope, though. Story 42. I disliked myself because I felt that I wasn't good enough and generally had low self-esteem. However, as I grew older, I learned to not care and realized that some of the things I do are better than others. Now, I remind myself that I am better than others. Story 43. It just happened without me realizing it. My crush, who always made me happy, would talk to me often and seemed very understanding and forgiving. I felt like I knew he loved me, so I should love myself too. If the kindest person I've ever met can love me, then I must not be that bad. It took time to eventually be able to do it, but it's not supposed to be a quick process. Rushing things is no good. I often say that to my friends. I met someone I truly loved, and it made me change. Story 44. I'm in therapy. I realized how much I've been through and developed a lot of compassion for myself. It's easier to be okay with my flaws knowing that life has been hard on me. Now I'm kind of proud. Story 45. In my 20s and 30s, I experienced a lot of circular logic. Due to many friends I lost during the war, I didn't believe I was worthy of living or that I was leading a life deserving of their sacrifices. This led me to hate myself deeply. I would often think very poorly of myself and feel undeserving of happiness. Consequently, I sabotaged good things in my life, often by being unfaithful to my partners. It took therapy for me to realize that I don't owe anything to those who have passed. I learned that I am an imperfect person living in an imperfect world, and I should extend grace to myself. I deserve to be happy and to enjoy good things in my life. Story 46. I began to eat healthier foods. I started to sleep earlier. I began to exercise regularly. I left a job that I disliked. I worked diligently to build a new career. I stopped going on second dates unless I was certain it was a positive experience for both of us. Eventually, I looked in the mirror and felt grateful to the person I saw for the journey that led me to where I am now. How could I dislike someone I viewed with gratitude? Story 47. Lifelong journey. Find something and become really good at it. A skill or hobby that you can be proud of and that others can also respect. The more you improve, the more confident you become, and the less inadequate you feel. Apply those skills, set and achieve your life goals, and work towards them. If there are qualities about yourself you don't like, work on them. Whether it's jealousy, being too sensitive, lashing out with anger, or being overly controlling or anxious, these traits can be addressed and managed. Good luck out there and be kind to yourself. Everyone figures out life at a different pace. Story 48. This helped me get the right mindset. This also helped me with the methods. Story 49. I reflected on the people who made me dislike myself and realized they were not worth my energy. So why did I grant them the power to hurt me? I considered the advice I would give to someone else in a similar situation. If I can show kindness to a stranger, why can't I extend that same compassion to myself? I am working on reaching a place of true self-love because I deserve it. We all deserve to love ourselves. I would never speak about others the way I speak about myself, so it is time for me to accept the love and kindness I readily offer to others. Story 50. I wouldn't say I hated myself, but I definitely loathed myself. I lost nearly 100 pounds, made fitness and healthy eating a priority, and improved nearly every aspect of my life as a result. Story 51. I came to realize that the people I idolized growing up all had issues as well. My uncle fought in the Vietnam War but had a temper and drank too much. My dad was a very successful engineer at General Motors but interacted poorly with people and was very secluded personally. The musicians and actors I admired all had various problems. We all make mistakes and have things to work on. I'm not doing anything terrible. I was just a shy nerd. Hating yourself doesn't solve anything. It's easy to do, and being critical of yourself can be beneficial, but expecting perfection is too much. My friends sat me down a few times to tell me they loved me for who I was and that I needed to give myself a break. We're only human. Story 52. I ended my relationship and made a resolution to change the things I didn't like about myself. The first thing I focused on was my teeth, which had always been crooked and a significant insecurity. I also began trying new hobbies because I had always thought I was boring and lacked talent. I met my current partner through one of those hobbies about a year ago, and life just keeps getting better. Exploring new hobbies was probably the most impactful change overall. Story 53. I asked myself, would I treat a friend this way? When I realized the answer was no, I knew I had to be kinder to myself. Story 54. I convinced myself that I am awesome. Once I did that, it was easy to convince others, which boosted my confidence. This made me even more awesome and people noticed. My confidence continued to grow in a positive loop. Story 55. Ketamine and cognitive behavioral therapy. I realized recently that I only disliked the part of myself that wasn't aligning with my authentic self. I was living for my father and society, subconsciously embodying their values as my own. I'm free from that now and struggling to find a reason to dislike myself. Story 56. At 45, I try to let go of the pressure and not worry so much. I make an effort daily to be kinder to myself and reflect weekly to see if there are any changes I can make. I still find myself expressing negative feelings occasionally, often subconsciously, and it can be difficult to change that mindset. However, I notice improvements as I get older. Confidence is challenging to build and even harder to maintain. Story 57. Therapy helped me understand that many reasons for my feelings were unfounded and often factually untrue. I redirected the blame and negativity towards those who deserved it, rather than myself. I took steps to remove my birth family completely from my life. I am still learning. I still hear the voices and see the memories that brought me down, but I can handle them much more easily now. I strive to surround myself only with people who appreciate me and want me around. Story 58. Start doing things you enjoy. I went $3,000 into debt taking a trip I couldn't afford, buying nice clothes, and obtaining supplies for a hobby I enjoy. This experience gave me appreciation for life and the pursuit of doing things. Having goals made life easier and ultimately made me a nicer person to be around. Although I developed a drinking problem from enjoying myself too much, I addressed that issue as well. Engage in activities that bring you happiness. Even if you can't afford it right now or it's not the right time, it's better than wasting your life. One day you will be older and look back on this period, realizing you should have taken action sooner. Story 59. Perspective change in life. Identify what you dislike about yourself and why. Change what you can and accept it, while letting go of what is beyond your control. Also, have sympathy and compassion for yourself. You are not perfect, and that is okay. No one is. Story 60. A few different ways. 1. I got older and stopped caring about small things I cannot change. I developed a healthy relationship with someone who loves me for who I am. After consultations with a psychologist, I began working on the things I can change, such as my outlook on myself, the world, and other people. Story 61. I started using a horse crop every morning before breakfast to release my self-hatred for the day. Story 62. I started by accepting that I wasn't perfect. That was a stepping stone. I had to accept that I was transgender and that it was something I couldn't ever reject if I wanted to truly love myself. I tried for a decade to suppress that part of me and hated myself for it, but nothing could change that. I realized I had to accept it instead. You can't work against yourself. You have to work with yourself. Story 63. I am stuck with myself. I might as well accept it and move on. I have learned not to be anxious about things I cannot control, and being myself falls within that category. Story 64. I realized that the parts of me that I disliked were inherited or shaped by people I did not admire. I focused on removing those traits and becoming the kind of person I would enjoy meeting. Story 65. I sometimes struggle with self-acceptance, but I have come to understand a few important things. I recognize the need to prioritize my relationships with the people I care about. I have a lot of acquaintances, but I often feel guilty because my mental health challenges prevent me from staying in touch with close friends. By reaching out, I can strengthen these connections, though I realize I was missing something crucial. I discovered that there is one relationship in my life that I have neglected. The one with myself. I need to give myself the attention I deserve because, at the end of the day, no matter how many people I know, I still have to live with myself. Taking care of myself involves basic actions. Showering, eating properly, getting outside, trying new activities, and keeping my space tidy. It may seem simple, but for someone who has lost their sense of self, it's an important beginning. Another realization is that cleanliness holds value. When I clean my car, take care of my hygiene, or organize my room, it signifies that I appreciate these aspects of my life. Putting effort into maintaining them improves my mood and enhances my sense of self. There are still many lessons to learn, but that is what life is about. It's a constant journey of learning. I can't be upset with myself for not knowing everything. I hope these insights are helpful. Story 66. When I disliked myself, I often thought negatively. I would tell myself, "You're so stupid. You should be smarter." This kind of self-talk affected everything. After therapy, introspection, and gaining self-awareness, I've learned to accept myself, including my flaws. That said, it is very difficult to do. I will never be perfect. Sometimes I make mistakes even when I know they are wrong. And that's okay. I am not a bad person. Story 67. My therapist pointed out that I tend to believe that everything bad that happens is my fault, while everything good is due to others. I am not completely there yet, but I am slowly learning not to judge myself constantly. Understanding the origin of this mentality has helped me gain perspective. Story 68. Honestly, staring in the mirror while on mushrooms is not something I would recommend for anyone who isn't familiar with their situation, but it worked for me. Something just clicked, and I saw myself from an external perspective, thinking, damn, I wonder why I give this guy such a hard time. This was nearly 5 years ago, and it still resonates with me. I still experience self-esteem issues from time to time, but there is no self-loathing or hate, just occasional lack of confidence. Story 69. I reflected on why I disliked myself and was overly critical of certain aspects of my personality. I wrote down my thoughts after processing my feelings and began to shift toward behaving like the person I aspire to be. Along the way, I learned to appreciate the aspects of myself that I used to dislike and found a healthy balance. Story 70. I moved out of my home country and finally confirmed that I wasn't lazy and that all my financial problems were entirely due to the harsh economy I was born into. Story 71. I made a lot of effort to become a better person. Sometimes, a lack of self-respect is deserved, but that also means it can be re-earned. Once you see yourself on a positive path, everything gets easier. Story 72. I derive my sense of self-fulfillment from being able to perform useful work. I found something I was good at and did not let go. I also stopped sabotaging myself by smoking marijuana frequently. Story 73. The thing that pulled me out of it was realizing that my past self didn't need my help anymore. My future self did. No amount of actions, thoughts, or feelings would help the past me that got hurt. What I could do was pour that energy into helping my future self. That's what kept me going, and it has treated me well. Story 74. I found Jesus and learned that my value and worth are completely in God and who He says I am, rather than comparing myself to worldly standards or measuring my worth based on the opinions and preferences of others. Story 75. I disliked myself based on what others thought of me until I realized that their opinions do not matter as much as the next person's. Story 76. I realized I was not living as my true self. I started working to figure out who I am. I cannot say I do not hate myself anymore yet, but I believe I am on my way. Story 77. I never hated myself, but I strongly disliked many aspects of my personality, except for my kindness. I was never satisfied with my appearance. I felt unattractive, short, weak, not very masculine, incapable, and worthless. I spent many years feeling isolated and lived with those insecurities. However, as I grew older, I decided that I didn't want to feel that way anymore, so I made conscious choices to change. I grew my hair out and made an effort to take care of it. I began growing plants and caring for them, which gave me a goal to focus on and something to nurture. I purged many of my clothes and started purchasing new items that suited me better. I worked on improving my cooking skills, both to eat healthier and save money. I tried to become more comfortable with talking so I wouldn't feel so incredibly shy. These small steps helped me feel significantly better about myself. I am not yet at the point of fully loving myself, but I have started to recognize my worth and feel happier about it. Story 78. I found myself and realized what I want to look like and what kind of person I want to be and already am. I understand the things I like and recognize my good character traits, such as being helpful. It has also been beneficial to have supportive friends who share similar interests, giving me a sense of being loved for who I am while also loving them for who they are, which is similar to my own qualities. Story 79. I would insult myself to maintain basic hygiene. Hey, your breath smells. Let's fix that. Your face is too hairy. You have food in your teeth. Okay. Smile, you dummy. Story 80. I let go of hating. Just change what you don't like and love what you can't change. It's not easy, but it is not impossible. Be around people who appreciate you. We allow ourselves to be affected by others very easily, so use that as an advantage. Story 81. Shadow work. Understanding the difference between who I actually am and the behaviors I adopted because of others' opinions about who I should be. I like myself much better than the person these people were trying to shape me into. Once I set boundaries and became comfortable with walking away, love and respect for myself began to flow in. Story 82. Closely observing your surroundings and understanding that everyone moves at their own pace and has their own reality to deal with. Working out does great wonders. Story 83. Dialectical materialism holds that matter is primary while consciousness is secondary. Everything is in a state of constant change. Each object contains an internal contradiction that defines its existence and lasts throughout its life. Therefore, external relationships between objects are secondary to the intrinsic nature of the objects. In class society, the world presents us with misleading ideas. Our environments are intentionally designed to create confusion. We learn, and if we choose to grow, self-hatred becomes a challenge to overcome. You are not alone among the billions of people on Earth. You can take responsibility by embracing individuality. Ultimately, the decision to change is yours. You cannot be coerced from the outside. Cultivate that mindset. Always strive for gradual improvement. One day, you will be proud of your progress, leading to self-love. Story 84. Becoming self-aware and more connected to yourself is important. Often, you may dislike the image you have created for yourself, despite being a beautiful soul, which matters far more than physical and materialistic things. As far as we can prove, this is the only life you get, so love yourself and take care of yourself. I still experience insecurities and self-doubt. It's normal, but I am very confident in my soul now. Story 85. I experienced a lot of tears while realizing things about myself. I learned to trick my brain into positive thoughts by stopping what I was doing whenever I had a negative thought. After being alone for a while, I became comfortable in that dark loneliness. Story 86. I still have moments of self-hatred, but for the most part it's good now. I stopped behaving poorly. I cheated on my wife multiple times and caused her a lot of pain. Somehow, she found it in herself to forgive me and support me. I am better than I have been in a long time. Story 87. Many factors, some small and some significant, contributed to my improved well-being. The most impactful changes were quitting alcohol, participating in a support program, and going into therapy. Smaller changes included becoming aware of how I speak to myself and choosing to be kinder. I asked myself if I were speaking to a loved one, like my younger sister, would I address her in that way? Absolutely not. A couple of years later, I realized I had suffered enough. I always felt the need to atone for something, but I could no longer recall what that wrongdoing was. I decided the punishment would stop, and I gave myself permission to be happy. That was many years ago, but I continue to live by these principles. I no longer engage in self-abuse and do not allow others to mistreat me either. I strive to be grateful and happy. Story 88. It's like falling in love. You have to learn to love your faults and quit lying to yourself. That leads to arguing with yourself, and there is a clear winner in that predicament. Story 89. Hating myself meant that my bullies win because I didn't hate myself until they convinced me I was worth hating. I refused to let them win. I still have self-esteem issues and I still don't think I'm pretty, but I am a really cool person with many endearing qualities to offer beyond just my outer appearance. Story 90. I got older and learned how to adopt the can't-be-bothered lifestyle. Now it's all just water off a duck's back or something like that. Story 91. I realized all the negative self-talk was just what I had heard from friends, family, and the military. These thoughts weren't mine. They were simply being replayed repeatedly. If I stubbed my toe, I would yell at myself like my mom used to in my head. Once I recognized that these thoughts weren't my desires but rather a reflection of how I coped with things, I was able to start healing. Story 92. It may sound like cliché advice often given in discussions like these, but I actually worked on myself. I started doing things I had never done before, like regular exercise, and I became decent at them. While it did not necessarily fix every area I disliked, it has given me things to admire about myself, which is an important counter to self-loathing. Being able to say, for instance, that not everyone has the willpower to regularly go to the gym, but now I belong to those who do, undeniably feels good. This includes seeing the results in the mirror and experiencing positive health benefits. Story 93. Quitting my alcohol use has greatly improved many aspects of my life, including my depression and self-esteem. Story 94. I realize that no matter what I do, there are people out there who just won't like me. I try my best not to be unkind, and if I fail, I try to apologize. I also rarely care what others think, especially if I am trying my best to do good things. Story 95. I am still trying to manage things. My narcissistic parents affected me so deeply that I lacked a sense of self and only felt the negativity of all the wrong I was constantly told I was doing. I try to remind myself to be more lenient and relaxed. However, I tend to be self-critical before considering other issues. I am a work in progress. I do not hate myself as much as I did yesterday. It's a bit like being a different version of myself. Story 96. Because of who I am, it has always been important to me to say things that are true. I reached an age where I thought, wait a minute, what did I just think to myself? I just had questions. When I was able to properly challenge my thoughts, it was a light bulb moment. I began to notice the differences in my reactions and the thoughts I chose to accept. I noticed improvements in how I viewed myself when I became willing to ask questions first and filter what I internalized. I was willing to consider what else might be true. It was a period of about 3 years of navigating through tough thoughts and emotions. It helped me understand what was important to me and how I could make choices that felt right for me. A significant shift occurred when I realized that with support, I could be a version of myself that was more neutral and curious about what I could do if I gave myself what I needed. I believe it has been a long time since I experienced a thought or feeling that was hateful toward myself. Even when I felt strongly about past regrets or things I used to criticize myself for, they no longer held the same power over me. I trust myself to avoid situations that could harm my mental health and progress. I fought for a better relationship with myself, and I am not willing to give that up for anyone or anything. It is not worth going back. When I consistently treated myself with respect and care, I began to embrace my softer, more loving self. Story 97. Years of learning to love myself. I used to think I was the worst and that no one could ever love me. Now I've fallen so in love with myself that if someone doesn't like me, I believe that is their loss. Story 98. My self-esteem improved, and I stopped hating myself when I started doing admirable things. I became honest, courageous, and generous, putting the welfare of others ahead of my own. Additionally, I stopped drinking alcohol, which was a significant help. Story 99. Ebbs and flows. But whenever it gets too real, I remind myself that I am going to die, and if I am lucky, be burned as fossil fuel. No one will know I existed. Whether I love, hate, am proud, ashamed, stressed, or experience any other emotion is the most irrelevant thing. We all march ceaselessly to death. Here's to sweet relief. Story 100. Honestly, for me, it was when I heard the wisest words of all. Never say to yourself something you wouldn't say to a friend. I realized my internal monologue was much harder on me than anyone else, and I started to ask myself why. Story 101. I used to think I was very unattractive. I hated my life, but I stopped focusing on my flaws and began to appreciate my good features. I have improved, although it's hard to pinpoint exactly how. Story 102. I began reflecting on the person I wanted to become and took actions to achieve that. Whenever I found myself slipping into bad habits, I asked myself if they were helping me reach my goals. I am not there yet, but I have improved significantly. Story 103. I pretended to love myself and thought I was better than everyone else until I ended up truly believing it. Fake it until you make it. This did swing the pendulum to the arrogant side, but I quickly balanced things so that I could love myself without having an ego. Story 104. Hate is a fire that burns very hot. Keeping a fire burning that hot for your entire life takes significant work. I got tired of working to hate myself. Once I stopped putting so much effort into it, I was able to see different sides of myself that weren't so bad. Now there's past me, who is frustrating, making it easier to be angry at someone who is both me and not me. Future me is an idealist, and present me is just trying to pay his bills and find where past me left my keys. Story 105. I saw the damage it was causing me, the cost it had on my life, where I wanted to be and where I was. Story 106. A significant part of my struggle was that I cared more about others' opinions of me than my own, and I did not love myself at all. Additionally, I spent 6 out of 7 days a week drinking to hide my insecurities. Eventually, I became sick and tired of feeling this way and realized there was a better path. I decided to return to the basics by exercising more and stopping drinking. Story 107. Self-compassion meditations I found online, along with self-help tools, have helped me be kind to myself in small ways each day. Making the effort to improve my mental health for myself has been a significant step for me. Story 108. I grew older, engaged in various activities, met new people, listened actively, asked questions, gained experiences, made mistakes, and learned significantly, which helped me build character. Story 109. Bizarrely enough, the social naturism lifestyle helped me develop a positive body image. My sister took me to a nude beach when I visited her at university at the age of 15. I returned a few times that week while she was in classes and fell in love with the lifestyle. Story 110. A lot of healing from my childhood trauma and trauma in general has taken place. I am a completely different and better person now. Story 111. Got hot and made more money. Losing weight and money have solved every problem I have ever had. I also read books. Story 112. Prozac, primarily therapy, and growing older have contributed to my journey. Some combination of these factors helps. There are days I still struggle with negative self-perception, but overall, I no longer hate myself. Story 113. When I look at old photos and videos of myself from a time filled with self-hate, I realize that my current self loves that version of me. Instead of repeating the cycle of sabotaging myself and becoming someone else who would appreciate my present self only in hindsight, I have chosen to love who I am right now, rather than becoming a terrible version that will long for my current self. Story 114. I decided the world was hard enough and that I didn't need to add to it. I concluded that being neutral and curious was sufficient instead of constantly striving for positivity. Over the years, I more or less stopped having self-hating thoughts. Story 115. The short answer is that self-hatred wasn't worth it. I had everything I needed right beside me. Family, friends, and a home. Story 116. I still struggle at times, but as cringy as it was to always hear, "Fake it till you make it" regarding confidence, it worked. I stopped waiting to look the way I wanted and wear what I wanted. When I started wearing what I desired, I began looking the way I wanted. I consciously sought the good in the mirror rather than the bad. Instead of focusing on the parts of my appearance I disliked, I took those features I was critical of and searched for the positives within them. Maybe I didn't like how a feature looked on its own, but I appreciated how it looked when balanced with the rest of my face. Confidence is one of the most attractive traits anyone can possess, in more ways than just appearance. I didn't have it at the time, but I started pretending I did. By acting confidently, I could see the results of that confidence, which made me genuinely more confident. It's also important to find positive people in your life, not just those who say, "You're pretty/smart/awesome no matter what," but those who encourage you while constructively pointing out areas for improvement. This way, you can continuously enhance yourself, knowing their feedback is sincere rather than simply what you want to hear. People can be challenging, and your mind may not magically improve. Doubts will inevitably creep in at times, no matter how hard you try. The key is not to dwell on it. When you're feeling down, do something that makes you feel good. If you feel lonely or unloved, spend time with someone who cares about you, whether that's a friend or family member. If you're feeling self-conscious about your appearance, dress up in something that makes you feel good about yourself. Remember, you possess free will and are allowed to do things within reason simply because you want to. Living life in constant fear of what others think can lead to self-hatred. I started to question, why do I care? How does this random person's opinion, whom I will never see again, affect me? I know it's hard. It's a long journey with inevitable setbacks. But keep pushing forward. Continue striving to improve yourself. Don't focus on what you dislike or what holds you back. Fight to become what you want. Most of the time, the only thing holding you back is you. Know that you are loved, even if it's from a random stranger on the internet. In summary, don't give up on yourself. Fight to be better. Focus on the good rather than the bad. Find a support system that you trust and that inspires confidence. Story 117. Part of it was that I stopped taking my old medication, which was negatively affecting me. Another part was losing weight. I also began going out and participating in every adventure and extreme sport I could find. Additionally, I accepted that sometimes there are things you cannot change, no matter how much you wish otherwise. It's important to make the best of every day and do everything you can while you still can. Story 118. I realized that all my friends and family thought very highly of me and felt it was a disservice to them to criticize their judgment. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.